Well, I grew up in Duncan, Oklahoma, and lived there until I graduated from college. That family home there, lots of relatives that lived there, cousins and stuff, and pretty much everybody except my grandfather went to OSU at some point. So we had quite a long history in the family. I think when my daughter went to college here, we counted up 24 or 25. I don't know, I lost count of the number of folks out of the family that came up here. Besides professors, and when I say professors, I'm thinking of Dr. Bell, who was my thesis professor, Dr. Maddox, who was the department head, who I later worked with in industry, Dr. Urbar, who was a well-known thermodynamics expert. I did a lot of work for him on the side, just with the program, and Dr. Robinson, who was the young professor in the department. He was quite a problem solver. I was his graduate assistant for 3 semesters. So getting to know those particular people was important. But interestingly enough, when I graduated, a man named Ben Odom, who was a graduate from here, came back. He recruited me to go to work at ARCO, and he was my first boss. And so he was quite an influence on me in the first early part of my career. You know, in engineering, you're very focused on engineering, on the work that goes with that degree. But I think the things that I remember are going to football games and wrestling, basketball, baseball, those types of activities that kind of give you relief. I was in a fraternity. My wife was in a sorority, so there was activities around those two also. And I also worked my way through school, so there was a work component to that. So you had work and school and some play, and you try to balance it all. When I first got here, I worked in the cafeteria. Then I got a job in the library. I worked in the architecture library, which used to be on the 5th floor of Engineering North. I don't know where it is today, because that building's been redone. But I spent several years in the architecture library, working in the evenings, which was kind of nice because you basically studied in between checking out books and things. And then in the final 2 years, I was a graduate assistant for professors there in chemical engineering. So I was never without a job. Well, I think the professors were really important. I got to know the professors as I went through graduate school. When you're in graduate school, you know, I was a graduate assistant for some. Dr. Urbar I used to run computer programs for him. Every time I went over to the computer building, he'd say, "Oh, go run this for me," you know. So I got to know a lot of the professors, and it was a small community. There was only, a half a dozen professors in chemical engineering at the time. And so we really got to know them and learn from each one of them different skills to use in my career. The company I was working for, we saw that there was going to be a market for more LNG plants. They had some old technology, refrigeration technology to liquefy the LNG, but it was not very efficient. And so that's when I got to working on an improvement to the old process that was more efficient in the production of LNG. And the interesting thing is, even though usually when you build something that's more efficient, it's more expensive to get that, but it turns out when it's more efficient, the equipment is smaller, and thus it's even more economical. So that's what really got our company back into the LNG business was an efficient process to make LNG. And so that's the basis of the patents, the basic patent on the liquefaction unit, and then several others on different configurations to handle different types of gas streams to make LNG. One of the organizations I worked with a lot was the Gas Processors Association, and then there's the Gas Processor Suppliers Association. They're very much intertwined, but it's the operating companies and then the engineering and manufacturing companies. Having worked for an operating company about half of my career and an engineering company the other half, I worked in both sides of that organization, a lot of committees, and a lot of the awards that I got were from that organization, thanking me and others for work we'd done. I got on something called the Editorial Review Board that publishes the engineering data book that the GPSA publishes for the industry. And that was about 30 years ago when I got onto that organization, and eventually chaired the data book work for about 20 years. And so a few years ago, they awarded me with a Lifetime Service Award, which was kind of, to me, an end result of all the other activities that have gone on. I think in a personal life, particularly since I retired, I've always liked working around the house and the yard, woodworking. I've got into cycling and running in the last 10 years, and so to keep active in those areas. And then along the way, we've got some grandchildren now. They live close by, and that's been a nice addition to my life in the last 10, 15 years.